reportedly owned by Iran. The Alavi Foundation is the name in the criminal complaint, but it's a front for the Iranian government, say feds. The U.S. government is now in court trying to force the forfeiture of over $500 million in assets, including this 36-story tower in Manhattan. With us now is Jim Walsh. He's an Iran expert and research associate for MIT's Security Studies program. And Jim, and we all talk about, nuclear funding that Iran keeps pumping into it. But I want to put up this, if I can, because the Bank Melli, which is Iran's biggest bank, just so people kind of get the nexus, if we can put this on the screen, this is what it deals with. The Bank of Melli, we know, has funding for Hezbollah in Lebanon. We know the Taliban as well as Hamas. The Taliban killing U.S. soldiers, Hamas firing rockets into southern Israel. Hezbollah, we know, is active in Lebanon. I mean, the question here is this money is being raised in this country and being used to kill U.S. troops abroad?
Well, I think if there's a relationship, it's a little more indirect than that. It's not as if I put in $1 in my bank account here in New York and then it ends up in a bank account in a Taliban and then the Taliban withdraws it and buys a weapon. The relationship, this really grows out of a set of instruments the government has used to go after Iran's nuclear program. And that bank you mentioned is a government-owned bank. It's Iran's government bank.
Sure.
And so we're trying to go off after the Revolutionary Guard. And we say, if you do business with the Revolutionary Guard, we're coming after you. So this bank has been doing business with the Revolutionary Guard. And we say, well, if you're going to do business with this bank, we're going to also come after you. And this foundation, apparently, this is the allegation in federal court, has had a financial relationship with the bank. So if you're doing business with that bank, we're going after you. That's sort of how it works. It doesn't mean that the actual dollars end up in their hands, but it means this entity is sanctioned, and we're going after anyone who's going to do business with that
entity. Is it your sense, Jim, that religious centers and cultural centers, embassies and consulates in this country are providing cover for Iranians' terror activities?
Well, it would be pretty, if I was an Iranian trying to fund a terrorist program, I would not use a financing scheme that was sort of dependent on what I did on enemy territory. That would be putting it at risk. I think obviously all countries that have embassies and consulates use those consulates to promote that state's interests.
Right.
And I assume that's happening in Iran too. But Iran, most of these activities, when they're funded directly by the government. You don't want to rely on sort of a tricky financing scheme to keep your program afloat.
Right.
So that's essentially what we're going after.
You mentioned the Revolutionary Guard, which is Iran's military. In essence, it's all the branches of their military, including their special forces, which is Quds. And we know, I mean, you look at the Treasury Department, and they'll give you kind of a rundown. They believe that Quds are responsible for terrorist attacks on countries like France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, Saudi Arabia. That's part of this entire issue, is it not?
Absolutely. The Revolutionary Guard is at the heart of it because the U.S., by legislation, has sanctioned the Revolutionary Guard. That's why this bank is in trouble, because the bank's been doing business with the Revolutionary Guard. And now that's why this foundation is in trouble, because it's been doing business with the bank. But the Revolutionary Guard, it's cash. The cash it gets to fund whatever operations it does, either internally or externally, that's coming directly from government coffers. That's where, it's like any government agency. It relies on the state rather than sort of odd financing schemes. That doesn't mean there isn't activity here that might be suspicious.
Sure.
But it's more about pressuring and isolating the Revolutionary Guard. That's what all these instruments are aiming at.
Jim Walsh. Jim, thank you, sir.